Alright, all you elf lovers.
It's just nice to meet another human who shares my affinity for elf culture.
It's episode 4 of the Rings of Power, and so far I've seen more rings on Jay-Z than in this show. For those of you who haven't seen my videos, we take the deepest of dives into the episode, going over the lore, connections to the movies, and theories on what will happen next. But don't worry, I save all book and trailer spoilers until the end of the video, and I'll give you a warning when that part comes up. We're gonna get into it. Make sure to like and subscribe, because here we go. We begin in the court of Numenor, where Queen Regent Miriel blesses the children that will one day forge Numenor's future. But what should be a joyous occasion is marred by the sacred tree Nimloth shedding its leaves. Last episode, the Queen told Elendil that the faithful believe that once a petal falls, it's a dangerous omen. And a dangerous omen it is, for it precedes a tsunami that completely destroys the Great Island Kingdom. And if I saw that coming, I'd be like, oh my god! This is known as the Great Wave, for which the episode is titled. Thankfully, it's all a dream, but for the Queen, this is but another omen that something terrible is on the horizon. Down by the Builders Guild, Tamar, the man who got his ass kicked by Halbrand last episode, stirs up seeds of discontent, spouting treasonous words that the Queen is being poisoned by Galadriel's nonsense. The Númenóreans once worked hand in hand with the elves to defeat Morgoth, but now they see the elves as a threat. Imagine trying to compete with a worker who doesn't sleep, tire, or age. It's like trying to compete with heavy spoilers. Amidst the commotion, we find the Chancellor Ar-Pharazôn and his son Kemen. The Chancellor uses this opportunity to get the people behind him. However, I got a feeling he's more interested in what the people think of him than actually defending the Queen. The dude even has goblets of wine at the ready, because nothing gets people on your side better than free booze. He harkens back to the time of Elros, the first king of Numenor, who we saw briefly at the Hall of Law. He was the twin brother of Elrond who chose to live as a mortal man. He'd go on to build the Hall of Laws. Surely the descendants of the greatest men to live cannot be overthrown by one elf. Remember that King Tar-Palantir was essentially overthrown and exiled to this tower because of his pro-elf sentiment. The only reason Miriel is in power is she proclaimed not to share her father's views. Kemen attempts to woo Eärien, but neither of these characters are in the books, so it looks like the writers are spicing things up by linking Elendil's family with Ar-Pharazôn's, as it appears the two will definitely clash, Elendil secretly being pro-elf and Ar-Pharazôn against. Galadriel shows the queens her findings from the Hall of Laws. Sauron is planning a takeover of the Southlands, and she wants the Queen to reforge an alliance with the elves to save the region. The Queen doesn't believe any of it, even making a joke that Elendil must be the heir of a runic emperor. In the books, Elendil is actually the son of one of the lords of Numenor, so either they have changed this for the show or are hiding his noble heritage. Considering he knows Elvish and there's a lot more he seems to be hiding, I think it's safe to say there's more going on here than meets the eye. With Miriel unwilling to aid her, Galadriel lashes out, demanding to speak to someone with real authority.
I'd like to speak with the manager.
She is, of course, referring to her father, King Tar-Palantir. This turns out to be a terrible move, as it lands her in jail right alongside Halbrand. With only a few days till his sea trials, Isildur is back on the sea. Last episode, we saw how he was distracted by a woman's voice calling out to him, and we hear this voice yet again. With Elendil telling his son to leave the past in the past and new information that his mother has passed, could this voice be somehow linked to his mother? Isildur lets one of the ropes slip in the hopes that he would get kicked out of the Sea Guard, but it has the inadvertent effect of landing himself and his two friends on Tamo and Valadil Acts 2. For his friends, this is the worst thing that could happen. They've been training for this their entire lives, and for them to lose this chance because of a guy who never even wanted to be in the Sea Guard in the first place, it's just further salt in the wound. Back in the Southlands, we focus on Erendir, who, after last episode's failed escape, has seen him chained awaiting the orc leader Adar. Not much is known about how and why an elf is overseeing the orcs, but there are some cool things to take note of here. Like, where did these scars come from? And why does he go all Michael Jackson and wear a gauntlet only on one hand? I did cross-reference it with the gauntlet found in Peter Jackson's version, and they are different. The big question here, is he Sauron or not? The orcs do call him Adar, or father, as if he's some sort of creator, and he'll later tell Erendir that he's no god, at least not yet. Now, if you do believe he's Sauron, one of of the biggest clues that points to this is his time spent in Balerion, Arondir's place of birth. During the First Age, Sauron was Morgoth's most trusted lieutenant during the War of Balerion, a war which ended in Morgoth's defeat and much of the continent being destroyed and underwater. Adar goes on to tell Arondir that he's been told nothing but lies, and to untangle them would require the creation of a new world. Not ominous at all. There's also this sort of odd ritual the orcs do after Adar kills an injured orc. Take note of the armor that's taken off the orc here, as it'll become important in my spoilers section. Unfortunately, Adar's first appearance leaves us only with more questions than answers, but he decides to set Arondir free as long as he delivers a message to the refugees at the Elven Tower. At the end of episode 2, we saw Bronwyn and her son Theo join a group of refugees making their way toward this tower. It's the logical place to hole up as it has views of the surrounding area and is somewhat fortified. But if the problem of orcs weren't bad enough, they're running low on food. Theo wants to help, but his mother forbids him from going into town and gathering supplies from Waldrig's tavern. Even though it's daylight and the orcs fear the sun, it's just too dangerous. So Theo does what any rebellious teen does and goes anyway. Now it looks as though his town of Tirharad is empty, but when he stumbles into the tavern, he's confronted by an orc. In self-defense, he takes out that blade with the mark of Sauron on it, and immediately the orc recognizes it, asking where he got it. Remember in episode 3 that Arondir surmised the orcs were looking for something while they dug, something that could be a weapon. Is this weapon what they've been looking for? We saw in episode 2 that the sword seemingly reforged itself after collecting part of Theo's blood. It has since gone back to its original form. However, when Theo is faced with danger, it's almost as if the sword has a mind of its own and jabs the hilt into his forearm, allowing it to reforge itself. We'll later see Waldrig have the same marking on his forearm. After all, the sword was taken from his barn, so he would have had some history with it. Theo's able to make his escape and hide in a well. Back in Eregion, work has begun on that giant forge tower after Elrond secured the help of the dwarves, but there's something that just isn't sitting right for me here. It's only been a few days since Galadriel left Lindon, yet this forge looks like it's at least several months into construction. Just to get the material there would take weeks. Is this just an oversight by the writers, or is there some timeline trickery going on? There is a theory floating around there that there are multiple different timelines going on, but I can't confirm that at the moment. Although work on the forge is going well, Celebrimbor can't help but feel that the dwarves are hiding something, so Elrond travels back to Khazad-dûm to visit his friend. There, Princess Disa makes up excuses for her husband's absence, stating that he's busy at one of the mines, but Elrond wasn't born yesterday. Literally, the guy is like thousands of years old. He sees Durin talking about making good progress in the old mine. Something Elrond knows is the mine beneath Mirrormere. The Fellowship passes this lake as they leave the mines of Moria. It was this lake where Durin the Deathless, the founder of Khazad-dûm, saw a reflection of a crown above his head while looking into it, and thus built the city of Khazad-dûm beneath the mountains that fed the Mirrormere. So Elrond snoops around this old mine, and somehow by reciting a rhyme and hitting the wall, the door magically opens. For the life of me, I don't know how Elrond got himself in here. You'd think the dwarves would have more security considering what lies below, but if you got some answers, let me know. Here Elrond finds his good friend Durin, who's none too pleased to see him. Durin knows he can't hide his secret much longer, and makes Elrond promise on the memory of his father not to divulge to anyone what the dwarves have found. It's a new ore, one that is lighter than silk but harder than iron, an ore with the potential to make the deadliest of weaponry and armor. This was that mysterious ore King Durin and the prince saw near the end of episode 2. Elrond calls it Mithril. You may remember it was a Mithril vest Bilbo gave to Frodo in Rivendell to aid him on his journey, a vest which was gifted to Bilbo by Thorin Oakenshield for his services as burglar in The Hobbit. Elrond asks why don't the dwarves celebrate this amazing find, but King Durin III has restricted its mining in the name of caution, and speak of the devil, at the same time the mine collapses, trapping 4 miners. There is a brief scene between Eärien and the Chancellor's son, but it really doesn't develop the plot at all. Like, you could take the scene out and it wouldn't change the episode at all. Back in the delightful prison of Numenor, Halbrand gives Galadriel some very odd advice. In order to master your opponent, you must master after that which they most fear. If you're part of the contingent that believes Halbrand is some form of Sauron, or perhaps one of his future Nazgul, this line seems to fit that narrative. Ar-Pharazôn arrives telling Galadriel that she is to be shipped back to the elves under armed escort, but Galadriel easily takes on these 4 armed guards, locking them in her cell. And Pharazôn is like, okay, chill, I'll sit this one out. Halbrand tells the Chancellor that he doesn't have to fight her if he knows where she's going, so I'm not quite sure what Halbrand's goal is here. On the one hand, he's helping Galadriel, but on the other, it's implied he tells the Chancellor that she's off to see the king. Isildur and Eärien catch up, where she finds out he's been kicked out of the Sea Guard, and he finds out she wound up on a dinner with Kemen. I do like the mural of men and elves working together to take down a sea creature. I wonder if it's related to the one we saw in episode 2. With Galadriel scaling the tower in a dress no less, we get our first glimpse of King Tar Palantir. The man looks like he's in rough shape. Her meeting with the king is short-lived, however, with the interruption of Queen Muriel. The king was overthrown when he proposed renewing relationship with the elves, and the Queen Regent, his daughter, was put in his place with the promise of quelling the unrest. On the eve of her takeover, the king showed her the Palantir, one of 7 seeing stones. You may remember Saruman controlling one in the Lord of the Rings. But the Queen Regent is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Does she side with her father and have open rebellion, or does she ignore the vision and risk the total destruction of Numenor? So even though Galadriel sees the exact same vision of this great wave, the queen stands firm on her decision to send her away. She says faith may bind one heart but not a kingdom, which I took to mean that the queen sides with her, but it's not enough to sway the kingdom. In essence, her hands are tied. Theo's friend Rowan arrives back as the famished crowd goes in a frenzy for food. The only problem is Theo's left behind and the sun has since set. While he attempts to escape, he's caught by that same orc who he encountered at the tavern, and he wants to know where that blade is, but before he can find out, Arondir saves the day. The two of them make their escape through the forest, and even Bronwyn has left the safety of the tower in search of them. With Arondir's arrow-catching skills, they make it into a clearing as the morning sun offers them reprieve from the sun-hating orcs. Across the misty mountains at Khazad-dûm, Disa performs a ritual pleading to the rocks to release the bodies of the miners should they still be alive among the rubble. What's really interesting here is the way the rocks respond to this plea. Look at the way they move, almost like the rocks and sand found in the introductory credits. Princess Disa apologizes to Elrond for lying to him about Durin. If it had not been for Elrond, Durin would have been trapped under that rubble. Durin arrives with good news. All 4 miners have survived, and in an emotional moment, Durin curses his father for shutting down the entire vein. Something, although perilous, could bring them unimaginable wealth. Elrond tells his friend not to be quick to anger. Unlike himself, Durin still has a father. Enjoy the time you have with him, because you never know when it'll be gone. Elrond's father was lifted beyond the bounds of this world by the Valar for his work in vanquishing Morgoth, and that's the last he ever saw of him. After he's cooled down, Durin apologizes to his father, realizing he was right. It is better to put the safety of his people above the pursuit of riches. How long this will last, well, we'll see, because nothing is said about the reign of Durin IV. However, we do know that Durin VI continues the mining of Mithril in Khazad-dûm. So sometime between now and the reign of Durin VI, mining for Mithril begins once again. The king and prince both believe the elves are up to something, so the king tasks the prince with going to Lindon to find out what this is. Arondir brings with him Adar's ominous message that the people may live if they forsake all claim to these lands and swear fealty to him. Should they choose not to accept, they will be coming for Ostirith, the elven outpost where they currently reside. Meanwhile, Waldreg tells Theo about the sword, that it's not a sword, but a power fashioned for their ancestors by Sauron's own hand. Remember that these Southlanders were once aligned with Sauron's master, Morgoth, hence why the elves built these outposts to keep tabs on them. Waldreg also believes that meteor that passed a few nights ago was Sauron returning. If that's true, does that mean the stranger is Sauron? Could there be multiple meteors? The Sauron meteor theory suggests that Adar is a servant and not Sauron himself. I'll probably shoot myself for saying this, but I currently believe Sauron is not the stranger nor Adar. Adar. Watch, I'll be proven wrong next episode. Speaking of Adar, he's told by an orc that they found it likely referring to Theo's sword. It's all the more reason for Adar to send his troops toward the outpost. The Númenóreans have gathered to watch Galadriel's departure. It's been decades since an elf was here, who knows how much longer before they see another. And as Galadriel departs, the queen makes her way back to the court when Nimloth's petals rain upon her. Not just one petal, but hundreds. Both Elendil and Miriel share a look like, oh, this can't be good. Notice that Halbrand has made it out of jail. Was it Ar-Pharazôn who let him out? How did this happen? And the queen takes a big gamble, a compromise that may appease the people while allowing her to venture to Middle-earth and see if it's true that the Dark Lord has returned. She will personally escort Galadriel back and aid their besieged brethren in the Southlands, taking any who wish to prove their valor among them as part of an expeditionary force. In her speech, there's no mention of forging any alliance with the elves, plus it gets rid of Galadriel, so it seems to be a win-win. This will likely put Ar-Pharazôn in charge while she's away, which raises major red flags for me considering how much of a schemer he seems to be. The ships will leave in 10 days, and both Isildur and his friends agree to join this force. Isildur has always yearned to travel to Middle-earth, where it was hinted his brother Anarion lives. Now, if you want to see where the show may be headed in the episodes to come, this is your warning for the book and trailer spoiler section. I won't be going over every shot found in the trailers, just the stuff I think may be relevant for next episode. Well, it looks like Galadriel leaves with her expeditionary force and is on her way to Middle-earth. They have 10 days to prepare, so whether they leave right away or if it takes some time remains to be seen. We went an entire episode without the Harfoot storyline, so I imagine we'll get a lot more from them next episode. We'll see the stranger fend off a group of wolves protecting Nori and her family. Here's a giant flock of what I think are orcs, since the next shot is of Adar in front of his orc army. This might be them preparing for their attack on Ostirith. And it looks like Prince Durin will be making it to Lindon for that meeting with King Gil-galad, hoping to find out what the elves are planning. Halbrand asks Galadriel why she continues to fight. She is likely wanting him to join her to Middle-earth, something he does not wish to do. He said countless times he wishes to remain in Númenor, likely because something haunts him back home. We do see that he eventually gets some sweet new armor and kicks some ass with Galadriel in Middle-earth. Interesting to note that there are no images of Queen Miriel at all in Middle-earth. Here we see that expedition force invading the orc-held town of Tirharad, where Theo and Bronwyn are from. We can see Waldrig's tavern here, and there are a ton of arrows on the roof, so it looks like this is some sort of big assault. Here's Eärien a bit tearful as the soldiers make their way onto the ships to leave Númenor. Of course she's sad because now both her brothers will have left her. Isildur in the middle of battle, it looks as though he's made it across the sea. His ship explodes in what appears to be the Númenor harbor. It's just a gut feeling that this could be some sort of assassination attempt on either Galadriel or the Queen, or it just may be someone who does not want this expeditionary force to leave. This shot of Galadriel alongside her expeditionary force is either the takeover of Tirharad or a battle down the line. I also wonder if this shot of her recovering in this destructive ashen waste is from this battle or something else. Later on in the third trailer, we see this image of the expeditionary forces and Tirharad townspeople celebrating what might be their victory. However, this huge explosion happens. There's a brief shot of Galadriel closing her eyes with embers flying around her. This looks like it could be linked to that destruction shot. Arondir has infiltrated the tower where a group of orcs with torches have gathered. Maybe this is some sort of trap they've devised, as we see a bunch of orcs completely decimated by a landslide of rocks. Notice here that Arondir is wearing his elven watch armor, the same armor that was taken off that orc. Does he get it back somehow, or is this just a spare laying around? Check out this juicy image of orcs ascending the tower. Leading them is Adar, but look who's beside him. It appears to be Waldrig. It looks like he's turned sides, promising Adar he knows where he can find that sword. Now, one of the trailers also shows a Balrog. In the books, it's King Durin VI who unknowingly awakens the slumbering Balrog within Khazad-dûm while venturing deeper for Mithril. I wonder if they'll change this for the show to link it up with Durin IV's Mithril find. That would make a lot more sense than just having a random Balrog appear. It's this Balrog that eventually leads to all the dwarves having to abandon Khazad-dûm. But now I leave it to you. What are your thoughts about this episode, and what do you think will happen next? Thanks for watching, everyone. Be sure to like and subscribe, and for more bad takes, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember,
Here's Sauron.